There are inventions in history that appear not with celebration, but with silence. They do not announce themselves or demand to be remembered. They drift in, quiet as breath, and find their place not in headlines or monuments, but in daily life. The rocking chair is one of these. It did not arrive in a blaze of invention. There were no speeches, no signed patents, no one claimed credit. It was never a revolution. It was an evolution. A chair that began to move gently and changed how we rested. Long before the first known rocker was built, people had already learned to sway without standing. Mothers rocked babies in their arms. Farmers shifted in their stools after long days. In the fields, monks leaned forward and back in rhythm with their chants. Movement was natural. Chairs, until then, were not. No one knows the exact day the first chair was made to rock, but sometime in the early 18th century, perhaps earlier, a simple addition was made. Two curved runners attached beneath the legs of a straight-backed chair. They allowed it to move forward, then back, and then forward again, with the smallest effort. Rest had become motion. It may have started as a child's toy, or as a way to turn a nursery chair into something more soothing. Or perhaps it was just the work of a carpenter who wanted to stretch his legs a little further while carving in silence. Whatever the reason, it caught on. In colonial America, these modified chairs began to appear in nurseries and front porches. They weren't made of rare wood or built with ornate detail. They were plain, functional, often pine, sometimes oak or maple. Simple tools for simple lives. But once people sat in them, something happened. The body relaxed differently. The mind wandered more freely. Rocking brought with it a rhythm, a pulse that matched breath, thought, memory. And so the chair stayed. They began to appear in journals and inventories. One wooden chair, rocking. In farmhouses, on porches, in quiet corners by the fire, they became fixtures of daily life without ever needing to prove themselves. Not everyone had one, but everyone knew one. In New England, the Shakers, known for their quiet devotion and simple craftsmanship, took notice. They refined the rocker's design, clean lines, balanced proportions, no decoration, just precision. They believed in function as a form of faith. If a chair could rock smoothly and silently, it was well made. If it could do so for decades, it was divine. They called their chairs prayerful. Not because they prayed in them, but because their motion was its own kind of meditation. A discipline of slowness. The rocking chair became more than a piece of furniture. It became a place to sit and return to stillness. A place to hold a child, or a book, or a memory. A place where motion soothed, not startled. Where quiet came not from silence, but from rhythm. In the South, the rocking chair moved to the porch. It faced outward, toward the road, toward the heat and dust and dusk. It became a seat of observation. Grandparents waved from them. Neighbors nodded in passing. Children fell asleep in their laps. A porch without a rocker felt unfinished. It lacked something human. It lacked waiting. The waiting done in a rocker was never impatient. It was soft, the kind of waiting done while listening to cicadas, or watching the sun stretch across the fence posts, or letting thoughts rise and fall, like wind through dry grass. In these chairs, time slowed, but did not stop. It moved in small arcs, quiet returns. Not all rockers were smooth. Some creaked, some groaned. The best ones, it was said, learned. Your weight, your shape, your rhythm. They knew where you'd lean, how far you'd sway, and how much to resist before returning. They were more than objects. They became mirrors. To sit in a rocking chair after a long day was not just to rest. It was to return to something older, something deeper. People began to associate rockers with memory. The sound of one moving in another room, the sight of it beside a bed, the way the light from a fire flickered across its curved legs. In literature, the rocking chair appeared often, never, as a symbol of power, but of presence. A widow sitting by a window, a grandfather asleep beside a radio, a mother gently humming. Always quiet, always grounding, because rocking is a motion that returns you to yourself, not forward, not backward, but inward. In some homes, the rocker was passed down, from mother to daughter, from father to son, with no ceremony, no wrapping, no note, just moved to a new room and continued. The arms grew smooth with use. The back leaned just a little more with time. The creak deepened. The chair changed no more than the family did, but never less. People did not always realize how much the chair carried, until it was gone, or until they sat in it again after years, and the motion reminded them, not of the chair, but of the person who once sat in it. It held more than weight. It held presence. During the 19th century, as industrialization reshaped cities, furniture began to be mass-produced, but even then, rockers remained popular. They were sold in Sears catalogs, shipped across states, packed into train cars. As homes grew busier, noisier, fuller, people still found time for the old motion, especially in moments when stillness was needed most. Hospitals began to use them for patients. The gentle movement helped reduce anxiety. It lowered heart rates. It offered calm. Therapists began to recommend them for trauma survivors, for mothers after childbirth, for the elderly in memory care. Because the motion of rocking is something the body does not forget. We rocked before we walked. We were rocked before we understood speech. It is a rhythm we return to, not by habit, but by instinct. And so the chair, born quietly, became a universal place. In mountain cabins, by coal stoves, in seaside homes, watching waves, in urban apartments, by cracked windows and plants on the sill. Each one slightly different, each one the same in purpose, to move without needing to go, to rest without requiring stillness, to feel without needing to speak. There are stories of soldiers returning from war who refused their old beds, but sat for hours in their mother's rocking chair, letting the rhythm soften something inside them, something loud, something wound too tightly. The chair asked nothing. It waited. Even now, in the age of digital clocks and satellite time, the rocker continues, though often ignored, or seen as decoration, or left unused on porches, more for memory than function. But those who sit in them still know. The body knows. It takes only a few minutes. Sit down. Settle back. Let your feet ease forward, and the chair begins to move. You do not rock it. You allow it to rock. You follow. You listen. You drift to daydream. In a rocking chair is to let the mind untangle, to remember things you didn't know you'd forgotten, to imagine without reaching, to rest in place. The best rockers do not shine. They are worn. They show their years. Their spindles are rubbed, smooth by fingers. Their seats sag slightly. Their legs don't quite match, but they remain, because no one throws away a chair that has carried time so gently. And if you find one, on a porch, in a dusty attic, in the corner of a used bookstore, try it. Do not rush. Do not brace. Do not ask what it will do. Just sit. Let it greet you. Let it remember you. Let it begin again. We've started here, at the beginning of the motion, where wood first learned how to move with breath, where waiting turned into a kind of peace. But the story continues. Elsewhere, the porch is warm, a chair waits for dusk, and a breeze is rising. Let's drift there. The creaking begins again. There are places in the world that feel like they were built to hold time still, not to trap it or measure it, but to let it breathe. Among these places, the front porch is one of the most enduring. It hon these porches, those old, weathered, platforms of pine and heartwood. The rocking chair sits not as decoration, but as invitation. Its shape is familiar before we even think to describe it. Curved runners, worn arms, a high back. Some chairs are grand, others simple. But all of them know the rhythm of dusk. They are carved for slowness, built for breath. The porch and the rocker are companions in this way. Neither demands, both allow. Porches became essential features of American homes during the 19th century. They bridged private life and public view. They were the threshold of a home's stillness and the world's unfolding. To sit on a porch was to see without being seen, to wait without anxiety, to rest without withdrawing. They faced the street, the yard, the fields, the sun. They offered visibility, not exposure. And always, there was the chair. In towns where summer arrived early and overstayed, the porch became a second room, and the rocking chair was the favoured seat. Not because it was most comfortable, but because it moved. Because it knew something about heat and waiting and stories that hadn't yet asked to be told. A typical evening might begin with the soft creak of the screen door, a tall glass of water in one hand, a folded paper in the other. The air would be thick with grass and the slow sweetness of honeysuckle. Someone would lower themselves into the chair, feel the worn seat bend ever so slightly, and begin to rock. Back, then forward, then back again. The movement was subtle, almost imperceptible to the eye, but inside the body, it shifted everything. Thoughts loosened, muscles released, breathing deepened, and in that motion the day started to let go. Porches were gathering spaces, but not crowded ones. A mother might sit with her infant, letting the breeze do what lullabies could not. A grandfather might rock with his boots beside him, silent but present. Children would play in the yard until the shadows lengthened and the calls for supper came. Neighbours passed and waved. Sometimes they stopped to sit a while. Sometimes they just nodded, a quiet acknowledgement of another day shared across distance. Conversations, when they happened, were slow to begin and slower to end. They curved like the rockers themselves, looping, returning, dipping into silence, without discomfort. Some porches had 2 chairs, others 5, and every family knew which one belonged to whom, not because of marks or cushions or paint, but because the chair remembered the shape of its owner. It leaned a certain way. It creaked differently. It responded like a dance partner who always knew the next step. And when someone left, moved, away, passed on, grew too frail to sit outside, the chair did not forget. It stayed in its spot, facing the same view, rocking only when the wind remembered to move it. In southern towns, where the humidity made the hours slower, rocking chairs became evening companions. After the heat of the day had finally broken, after the last chore was done, families would gather, not to be entertained, not to perform, but simply to exist together, swaying gently in parallel silence. And when night came, it brought not darkness, but softness. The porch light flicked on, sometimes a bare bulb, sometimes a lantern, and cast a circle of warmth that held everyone together without holding them in. The chair kept rocking, even when the voices faded, even when the children drifted to sleep, even when only the sound of insects and distant dogs filled the air. The creak of the chair became the heartbeat of the house. It said, "We are still here." It said, "There is time, enough for everything." In the Midwest, porches were built wider, stretched across the front of farmhouses, rocking chairs lined up side by side, facing the fields. Mornings brought coffee and the whisper of breeze through corn. Evenings brought cold tea and silence deep enough to feel like prayer. In the Appalachian Mountains, rockers were made by hand and passed down, each curve shaped by the same knife a father used to make his son's cradle. The same hands that felled trees, built fences, offered blessings. The same rhythm, carried forward by memory. In the Southwest, even in desert heat, porches offered, a place to cool. And the rocker remained, its wood darkened by sun, its joints polished smooth by years of slow motion and long watching. No matter where, no matter when, the porch was not complete without the chair, and the chair was not alive without someone to rock it. Some families had traditions. The eldest would always take the first seat in the evening. The youngest would be offered a lap when too tired to run. A guest would be given the corner chair, with the best view, and no one sat in the leftmost rocker. That one belonged to the grandfather, even after he was gone. Stories were told about chairs that rocked on their own. No wind, no cat beneath them, just movement, as if remembering, as if replaying a conversation long past. People smiled when they said it. No one was afraid. They believed the chair was simply doing what it was made to do, holding time, rocking memory. Some chairs were painted, others were left raw, white, blue, stained walnut. The colour faded quickly in the sun, but that didn't matter. The chair's beauty was in its wear, in the places where hands had rested, in the arcs where generations had pressed their weight. One could look at a rocker and know it had seen joy, and sorrow, and summer storms, and long silences where no one needed to speak. In cities, as porches shrank and balconies took their place, the rocker followed. It adapted, sat near windows, in courtyards, on rooftops turned gardens. It waited beside planters, listened to the hum of streetlights and distant trains. People still found their way to it. After long days, after heartbreak, after news that needed stillness to process. They sat, they rocked, they remembered what it meant to rest. There is a rhythm to rocking that doesn't match a clock. It matches breath, blood, wind through trees, waves at shoreline. It tells us there is no rush. It reminds us nothing is lost when you stop moving forward. The porch and the rocker teach together. One holds the body, the other holds the moment. In old photographs, taken in soft light, rocking, chairs are nearly always present. A child on a lap, a hat resting on the arm, a mother looking off into nothing, halfway between memory and expectation. The chair is not the subject, but it is always there, like punctuation in a sentence too long, to read without rest. Writers wrote in them. Painters sat in them while watching the horizon shift. Soldiers returned to them, their bodies tired, their minds full, their hearts needing a motion that required no effort. Rocking became therapy before the word existed. Even in churches, some porches held chairs, for the elders, for the grieving, for the ones who needed a moment between sermon and conversation. The chairs did not judge. They offered the same rhythm to everyone: the preacher, the stranger, the sinner, the child. And when porches rotted and were replaced, the rocker often remained, pulled into the garage, stored in the attic, forgotten until found again, dusted off, repaired, and returned to its post like a sentinel who never stopped believing the house needed watching. The porch light came to mean more than visibility. It was a promise. Someone is home. Someone is waiting. Someone will be here, even if you're late. And the chair, just beside that light, offered more than welcome. It offered presence, not flashy, not urgent, but real, enduring. To sit in a rocking chair beneath a porch light is to agree with the day, to forgive it its faults, to rest before asking anything more, to listen, not for answers, but for rhythm. And when the porch is finally empty and the light is switched off, the chair remains facing outward, ready, still. There is a certain kind of sleep that doesn't feel like falling, but floating. It does not begin with exhaustion or end with alarm. It unfolds, like dusk across a quiet field, like water softening into stillness, and perhaps nowhere has that sleep occurred more gently than in a rocking chair. The nap in a rocker is not planned. It arrives, quietly, slowly, first in the spine, then behind the eyes. The body leans slightly forward, then back, then forward again. And somewhere in that rhythm, time begins to blur. For hundreds of years, across countries and generations, people have drifted into this nap without resistance, without ceremony. It is the softest threshold between waking and dreaming, and in the right chair, it becomes a kind of time travel. The 19th century brought more than industrial smoke and iron bridges. It brought more people indoors. Cities grew. Windows opened to streets instead of fields. But within these new homes, tucked in the corners of parlors and reading rooms, the rocking chair remained. It waited near the fireplace, beside a side table stacked with books, often close to a cradle, sometimes next to a phonograph or a ticking clock. The chair became part of the day's rhythm, not just at dusk, but in the pauses of noon, the lull of afternoon, the slow dip into evening. A grandmother might close her eyes for 5 minutes and wake 2 hours later. A father home from work might sit to remove his boots and forget to rise again. Children, freshly washed, would be wrapped in blankets and placed in laps that rocked until both voices and questions faded. These naps were not escapes. They were returns. They returned the body to breath, the mind to calm, the home to quiet. And as the decades rolled forward, carriages giving way to cars, telegrams turning into telephones, the chair remained still, its creak the same, its welcome unchanged, its invitation eternal. There are records in old letters that mention the nap without naming it. Sat with Mama today, the sun was warm through the window. Or, Granddad's chair still rocks even when he's snoring. Simple phrases, but inside them, the shape of the moment lingers, rocking and resting, thought and drift, motion and stillness. During long winters, the rocker became a sun catcher. Placed by the window, it offered warmth even in the coldest months. An old man might sit wrapped in shawl and hat, his boots beside him, his eyes half closed, not sleeping, not watching, resting. He would not stir when the door opened or the kettle whistled, but his feet would move slightly, back and forth, as if tracing the years that now moved behind him. Women rocked with knitting in their laps, the needles still held even as the stitches slowed. Their fingers paused, then stopped altogether, the yarn resting across their palms, like thread between this world and another. Children nestled in these laps often fell asleep first, but the elders soon followed. A kind of mirrored dreaming, one head leaning against another, both rocked by the same hand of time. The nap in the rocker became so common that stories were written around it. Paintings captured it. A figure, always, slouched slightly, the shadows long, the chair angled toward light. It was never dramatic, never grand, but always peaceful, and it happened across all walks of life. The seamstress between orders, the schoolteacher after grading, the preacher on Sunday afternoon, the soldier returned home, hat over his eyes, the sailor adjusting to land, the mother between feedings. Time passed differently in a rocking chair. It did not count down. It spiraled. It rocked forward, then back, forward again, back. And somewhere in that cycle, the mind found its own tempo. Dreams came differently too. Not vivid, not loud, but soft, like remembered voices calling from rooms long since emptied. The scent of bread baking, the echo of childhood laughter, the shape of someone's hand once held and now gone. The nap wasn't escape. It was reunion. With self. With memory. With time. As the century turned and electricity hummed through homes, the rocker's purpose did not fade. It adapted. Now it sat beside radios, beside floor lamps, beside the sound of baseball games and war reports, and still, people napped. Not because they meant to, but because the body still knew that this motion was safe, that this chair did not ask, that it only offered. Hospitals began placing rocking chairs in recovery rooms. Mothers rocked their newborns into first, sleep. Patients in pain found comfort in the motion. Nurses paused just long enough to rest their eyes, and the chair carried them a few minutes forward in quiet. The nap between centuries was not just survival, it was ceremony, the body saying, "I am still here." In nursing homes, rockers lined sunlit rooms. Some moved, some stayed still, but each one offered a kind of dignity, a seat that welcomed not just presence, but rest. To sit in a rocking chair and doze off was not weakness, it was wisdom. To let the world continue spinning while your body swayed in its own orbit. To let the past arrive without knocking. To breathe as slowly as a tree grows. To become light, then heavy, then light again. Rocking chairs were built differently in different regions. In Scandinavia, they were carved of beech, bent with steam and polished by hand. In the American South, they were painted white with broad arms wide enough for books or cups of sweet tea. In China, bamboo was woven into elegant fans that curved across the back. In Mexico, leather stretched across frames of cedar. But wherever they were found, the chair understood the sleeper. It adjusted, it yielded, it remembered. The chair remembered every nap ever taken in it, the way the breath changed, the way the fingers curled, the way the weight shifted from intention to surrender. It remembered the light across the floorboards, the sound of distant birdsong, the hush of Sunday afternoon, the pause between chores. The world spun on. Wars were fought. Technology surged. Skyscrapers rose. But the nap in the rocker remained unchanged. Because there will always be a time of day, usually after lunch, usually before the evening cools, when the eyes grow heavy and the heart softens and the body seeks rhythm, not reason. The nap does not ask to be planned. It asks only to be allowed. And the chair, the same one that held your grandmother, your father, your aunt, still waits, still open, still ready to carry you softly, silently, for as long as you need. Because in the nap, time folds, and in the fold, something sacred lives. The nap between centuries is not just a moment, it is a legacy. It is the permission to stop, to dream, to drift, to close your eyes not from exhaustion, but from trust. Let us drift there now. The room is quiet, the chair is warm, and the light across the floor has begun to fade just enough. Most chairs were made to keep us still. They were built to hold the spine upright, the feet flat, the hands busy. They sat at desks, at tables, at altars. They were for meals, for meetings, for instruction. But the rocking chair was never made for those things. It was made for something gentler, for spaces in between, for moments when we are not expected to be anywhere else. It's hard to say when exactly a chair first learned to sway. It may have begun with a craftsman experimenting with curves, or a tired mother shifting her weight while holding a child. Perhaps it was a winter invention, a way to rock close to the hearth without rising from the warmth of the seat. No one wrote it down. No one made a declaration. But slowly, across continents and generations, chairs began to move, and everything changed. The first rocking chairs were not designed. They were discovered. The curve beneath the legs was not decoration. It was instinct, an answer to something the body already knew, that we are not built for stillness. That movement calms more than it distracts, that when the hands are empty and the breath is slow, a gentle sway helps us return to ourselves. Craftsmen noticed. They began adjusting their templates, adding runners to kitchen chairs, extending the backrest just a little, carving the arms wider to cradle elbows grown used to holding. These weren't innovations, they were kindnesses, and over time, the rocking chair became its own category, not just a modification, but a purpose. By the early 19th century, the rocking chair had begun to appear in homes across Europe and North America. In some places, it was seen as a sign of domestic comfort. In others, a tool for health. Physicians even recommended it. They believed the motion helped with digestion, circulation, mental calm. Patients recovering from injury were told to sit and rock. Women after childbirth were placed in rockers beside the fire. Elders, troubled by age or memory, found peace in the rhythm. The chair was not loud in its healing, but it helped. Quietly, repeatedly. It moved into nurseries, where mothers fed and rocked their children until sleep arrived. It stood by windows, where grandfathers watched the world slow in the hours between supper and darkness. It creaked in corners of libraries and living rooms, unbothered by the sound of pages turning or stories being told. And everywhere it went, it brought something that had become rare: permission to sway. Because rocking is not the same as moving. It is not hurried. It is not planned. It does not arrive with a goal or a destination. It is repetition without rush, effort without urgency, a conversation between the body and the chair. Forward, back, forward, back. Even when the world began to spin faster, when trains cut through hillsides and electricity hummed through walls, the rocker remained. It moved as it always had, oblivious to progress, loyal only to presence. It did not need to be updated. Its function could not be improved, because it did one thing perfectly. It held people in motion while keeping them still. In certain regions, rocking chairs became so common that homes were designed around them. In the American South, for instance, porches were widened to accommodate 2 or 3 rockers, not facing each other, but outward, toward the yard, the road, the fields, because the purpose wasn't to talk, but to be, together, apart, aligned, by direction, not by words. Children learned early how to sit in them, how to start the motion, how to feel the pull and release. Many didn't need help, their bodies understood. They climbed up, scooted back, and began to sway, sometimes with a book, sometimes with a toy, sometimes with nothing but imagination. Stories were shaped in those chairs. So were habits. A person who rocked in the evening often returned to it. Every day, it became part of the rhythm, not a habit of efficiency, but of restoration. The body looked forward to the sway the way the mind looks forward to sleep, a way of letting go, without disappearing. There were some who found it hard to stop. They would sit, and hours would pass unnoticed. Meals forgotten. Letters left unwritten. The mind wandered farther, while the body stayed near. And the chair, faithful as ever, moved only as needed, never more, never less. During times of grief, the rocker served a new purpose, not as healer, not as cradle, but as companion. Mourners sat in them when words were too sharp, when memories came in waves too strong to stand against. The sway became a balm, a soft reply, a way to rock the ache without speaking it. Even the empty chair came to mean something. When someone died, their rocker was often left untouched, not out of superstition, but respect. It remained in its place, facing the window, or the fire, or the garden. And now and then, when the wind passed just right, it would move, just once, just slightly, enough to notice, enough to remember. Rockers were not always solitary. In many homes, 2 sat side by side. Spouses, siblings, friends. They swayed in time, sometimes together, sometimes with offset rhythms. They didn't always speak. But the silence between them was not empty. It was shared. As communities expanded and living spaces shrank, the rocker adapted. It moved indoors, into sunrooms, into reading corners, onto back porches tucked behind houses. It lost none of its power. It still held people through winter and memory and change. Rockers were built of many woods: maple for strength, oak for tradition, pine for softness, mahogany for warmth. Each brought its own sound, its own weight, its own language of motion. Some had cushions, others remained bare, some painted, Others left raw, but all rockers, no matter their form, knew how to listen. To the room, to the person, to the years unfolding quietly inside the sway. There were chairs that groaned with each arc, and chairs so smooth they could rock for hours without sound. But none of them asked to be noticed. They asked only to be used, to be entered slowly, to be trusted, to be allowed to do what they do best. In photographs from the 1900s, rocking chairs appear often, on porches, in parlors, at the edges of celebration. There, not centered, not posed, but they are present. A grandmother's hand resting on the arm, a child curled into a lap, a newspaper folded neatly on the seat, a dog asleep beside the leg. The chair was always there, even when the world forgot to look, and it was always swaying. By mid-century, mass production had touched every corner of daily life. Rockers, too, began to be made in factories. Some were hollow, lightweight, easy to move. Others, surprisingly heavy, built to last generations. Both had their place, but the older chairs, the hand-built, heirloom rockers, continued to be passed on. They carried more than bodies. They carried names, stories, grains of dust from homes no longer standing. A chair once used by a grandfather might later be found in the nursery of his great-grandchild, still rocking, still comforting, still speaking in that quiet language of motion. Even now, in the 21st century, the rocker endures. In a world of speed and efficiency, it remains defiantly slow. It waits in corners, on balconies, by hospital beds, in libraries, on patios. It waits without complaint, because rocking doesn't go out of style. It exists beneath it. There are nursing homes where rows of rockers line the windows, each one carrying a person forward and back as light moves across their laps. There are rooftop gardens where rockers face sunsets no one photographs. There are school libraries with one chair set, aside just to rock while reading. There are apartments too, small for dining tables but big enough for a single rocker, and the peace it brings. The chair has learned to exist in every kind of space, but it has never forgotten how to sway. The sway is simple. It is not ambitious. It is not designed to impress. It's designed to remind. That movement can be soft, that time can be held, that being still can include motion. And so, when we sit, the chair begins again, not with instruction, not with demand, but with the invitation it has always extended. Be here. Breathe. Let go. Forward. Back. Forward again. Still. Let us drift there now, where another chair waits, where the wood is warm and the quiet rocks gently between everything we've done and all we've yet to dream. There are certain things in life that move us, not by force, but by stillness. A gaze held a moment longer, a memory recalled by a scent, the way sunlight drapes across the same floor every afternoon. These are not loud events, but they change us, quietly, repeatedly. The rocking chair is one of those things. It does not demand our attention. It does not announce itself. It does not declare importance or chase relevance. And yet, generation after generation, people return to it. Not just because it rocks, but because of what that motion reveals, the stillness it carries, the stillness it teaches, the stillness that gently moves us. In every culture where rocking chairs appear, they take on meanings beyond utility. They become places of pause, places of reflection, places of soft connection. The same chair may hold an infant in the morning and an elder in the evening. It may rock through laughter one day and sorrow the next. It does not change, but we do, and the chair bears witness. In certain indigenous communities, chairs were carved not only for function, but as carriers of spirit. The one who sat in them was not merely resting. They were connecting to a rhythm that predated them. The earth moved, the trees swayed, the breath repeated. To sit in that kind of motion was to remember where you belonged. In Eastern traditions, rocking was often linked to meditation, not seated in stillness, but in motion that required no thought. Forward and back, like breath, like mantra, a quiet, physical prayer. And in the West, even without realizing it, people adopted this same truth. They called it comfort, or calm, or habit. But in reality, it was restoration. It was a return to rhythm. The chair, after all, is a rhythm keeper. Not like a drum, which marks time. Not like a metronome, which regulates it. But like a wave. Or a heartbeat. A reminder of what time feels like when you're not chasing it. There are homes with rockers older than anyone living inside them. Chairs that belong to grandparents and great-grandparents before them, their joints loose, their arms darkened by hands long gone, their seats grooved from decades of settling in, and yet they still sway. These chairs are not just antiques, they are inheritance. To sit in one is to sit in someone else's memory. To take your place inside emotion that started before you were born. The stillness they offer is not silence, it is presence. A kind of attentiveness to the now. You do not check your watch in a rocker. You do not reach for your phone. You simply let the world shrink to a few essential things. The creak, the sway, the breath in your chest, the light on the floor. Even the language surrounding rockers reflects this quiet reverence. People don't say, "I used to sit in that chair." They say, "That was Papa's chair." Or, "Mama always sat right there." The place itself matters. The relationship between person and chair is storied, almost sacred. We don't say, "Goodbye to those chairs." We leave them where they were, as if their job continues, even in absence. Some families keep a rocker in the same corner for generations. The room changes. The wallpaper peels. The furniture is replaced. But the chair remains. Not because it's the most comfortable or most attractive, but because it knows the room. It knows how the light shifts at different hours. It knows when the house groans. It knows the sound of night coming in through the windows. It knows us. In hospitals, rockers have long played a role in healing. Nurses rock infants in neonatal care. Families rock beside loved ones in long recoveries. The chair becomes a tool of presence when there's nothing more to do but stay. In prisons, inmates who've earned trust may be allowed to sit in rockers. Not for reward, but for dignity, for rhythm, for a return to some part of themselves, lost in noise and confinement. In museums, some chairs are preserved behind glass, too fragile now to hold weight, but still powerful. Visitors stand before them in silence. Some smile, some cry. Because even through the barrier, the chair still sways. In imagination, in memory, in meaning, and even in cemeteries, some mourners bring rockers. Not benches, not stools, a chair that lets them rock beside the grave of someone they loved, to sway in the presence of what remains. The chair becomes a language. The body says what words cannot. Forward, back. I remember. Forward, back. I miss you. Forward, back. I am still here. The stillness that moves us is not the absence of motion, but the fullness of it. A motion so natural it needs no effort, so familiar it needs no name. It is the motion of trees in wind, of mothers breathing beside sleeping children, of tides returning, of time repeating, of love that doesn't need to be proven to endure. The rocking chair holds space for all of that, and it does so without ever changing. In modern homes, rockers may be more stylized, sleeker, designed with curves that echo contemporary trends, but the motion remains unchanged. The arc may be tighter, the legs may be wider, but when you sit, the breath deepens just the same. Even a minute or two is enough. A pause before a meeting, a rest between chores, a place to think before speaking, a space to do nothing at all. Rockers remind us that we are allowed to stop, that the world continues even when we don't contribute, that rest is not wasted time, it is essential time, and that the quiet we enter through a rocking chair is not absence, it is presence turned inward. In retirement homes, some of the most requested spots are near the window with a rocker. People wait for their turn. They know what it gives. It is not entertainment. It is return to breath, to memory, to self. The stillness that moves us is what we feel when we stop striving, when the doing fades and the being becomes enough. The chair doesn't just rock, it restores. And we, rocked gently by its rhythm, rediscover that we too are part of the rhythm of things. And when the day ends, when the light dims, when the house grows quiet, often the last sound is the creak of a rocking chair. One final sway, one final moment of presence, before bed, before silence, before dreams. The chair stays behind, still, quiet, moved, ready, and somewhere, as always, someone else begins to rock.